Well, those of you who are with us on Zoom today, welcome again. We're having a little problems technically with Facebook Live again, so hopefully Jonathan will get that up real soon. We wanted to talk today a little bit about the times, the crisis that we find ourselves in, COVID-19, and how people look at it again. We wanted to bring up the subject of theodicy, and I'll let Paul start us off with that, maybe by explaining the term and then going from there.
Thank you. So theodicy is the subject of a good God and pain and suffering, and how those two things go together. And it's so fascinating to me. This issue is proverbially the biggest issue with saying, I don't want to believe in God because of the problem of suffering. And I get that, but I've even heard scientists who are starting to talk about intelligent design as a real option in science, and they don't want to say intelligent design is God because of theodicy. That's when they come down to a moral issue, which is fascinating to me. But it's the big question. It's what I tried to address in the Shack, and I think in all of our writing, we're constantly weaving conversations around the issue of pain and suffering, especially losses that just don't make any sense rationally. And in my background, my theological background in modern evangelicalism, we simply attributed it all kind of to God. You know, this is part of God's plan. This is part of God's, and you can hear that now in terms of COVID, not only is it part of God's plan, it's now part of God's judgment. And so, you'll even find people talking about Revelation passages, and this is the fulfillment. And then on the other side, you've got people who are frantically trying to find a conspiracy theory of one sort or another. And it's a way to manage insecurity and anxiety and uncertainty, because heaven forbid we would actually trust a good God, So we need to have a reason not to trust everything, and then try to deal with our post-traumatic stress when this is all done. But it's a fundamental issue. And I was having a conversation. I was talking to the Posse, that band of very powerful women who pray for us and care for us and watch us from a distance. And I was in a conversation with them on Saturday, and I told them about a conversation I just had with my grandchildren, because on Tuesday afternoon, so this afternoon, after this is over, I will do a class, and I do it once a week for 7 of my 12 grandchildren. And a couple weeks ago, I asked the question, do you think God made viruses? A lot of times we don't talk to our children. We just let them make assumptions because we don't even know how to talk about these things ourselves. And so I wanted to talk to the kids about this. And I said, do you think God made viruses? And immediately their response was no, because to them, viruses belong in the category of something evil. And I said, oh, so where do you think they came from? And the response of the older ones, interestingly, was immediate. It was Satan. This is part of the evil force in the world, is to create viruses, because look at the hurt that they're inflicting on people. And I said, I don't think Satan's a creator. So I don't think Satan, I don't think Satan created the viruses. What other options are they? And the only one they could think of was Adam and Eve, kind of because of their fall, they started the virus movement. And I said, scientifically, do you know that without viruses, human beings couldn't survive on this planet at all? And if it weren't for viruses have a very specific job. And part of it is to take apart bacteria. And if we didn't have viruses, the whole planet would be a big slime ball of bacteria. And after a while, it would eat up all the natural resources and nothing would exist, not even bacteria. It would all die. And so viruses are very, very important. In fact, without viruses, we wouldn't have the water cycle. You wouldn't have rain and snow and sleet and hail and all of these things, because viruses are constantly tearing apart bacteria. And then, so I told him, I'm pretty sure God made this. Then why are they hurting people? See, and that now you're getting deeper into the questions of theodicy. And I go back to something that Ravi Zacharias presented one time that has helped me a lot. And he talks about creation and said there's only 4 possibilities at creation. One is that God chooses not to create, which is a possibility, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. The second one is that God creates a machine. That is, everything works by natural law. Everything is part of a machine. It's a very complex machine. That's the second possibility. The third possibility is not only does God create a machine, but introduces human beings who think they are able to make free choices, but actually aren't. They just have, that's part of the machine, is that they think that they can choose, but they actually can't. And then the fourth possibility of creation is to create a universe in which there is this high order of being who could actually say no to God, say no to love, no to kindness, and that God in kindness and love would give steerage or a sense of supervision to this high order being, and their choices would matter. In fact, they would matter so much that God would also submit to them, because that's what relationship and love is. And Robbie says, out of those 4 possibilities, there's only one universe in which love is even possible. And if God ever violates your ability to choose, we go back to universe number 3, in which you think you have an ability to choose, but you don't. And this does not mean that our will is not coerced. It's incredibly coerced. We got somebody's background stuff going on, but incredibly coerced, right? And the work of God in our lives in love and relationship is to free our will so that we can experience a broader and greater dimension of love and relationship. But this puts things like why COVID? Well, frankly, we have not learned to live with this planet in love. Our choices have not been love. And because our choices aren't love, we still are this high order being where our choices matter. COVID, the best guess so far or thought is that it originated in, the wet markets in China, but these things exist all over the world, where they sell quote unquote exotic animals and things like that. And when you have dense populations of people and dense populations of animals, and you're interplaying, these viruses can begin to mutate and jump hosts. And so what you have here in the origin of something that is a mutated virus like COVID that starts to jump a host and do damage is you can track it back essentially to morality, to the choices of human beings in terms of how they live with each other and how they live with this planet. And that becomes the basis for so much of the issues of suffering that we face. The beauty is that God doesn't abandon us to our stupidity or our idiocy. You're watching some folks begin to declare that it's better to sacrifice some of the old people, in order to open up the gross national product, and it's like, it's such a low view of humanity. And you go like, so how do we relate? Those of us who come from a punitive God, we want God to at least smite them with COVID so that they know how it feels. Yeah, I mean, that's such a broken response, instead of, no, this is not about, this is about God's kindness and care and our participation in it, even for those of us who are so broken. This is the truth of my own life, yeah? That that God cared for me, even in the midst of real stupidity on my part. And so it's Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. And this is a God who runs towards suffering, not away from it. So, and I talked to the kids about, how significant viruses are in the creation. And so God, who is good, creates a very good universe. And then we who are also made in the image of goodness, in our turning away, we begin to express devastation and darkness. And that unleashes consequences that God is with us in, but we're the perpetrators in these conversations. So that's the introduction.
Okay.
Can I just say thank you? I mean, that was just, bless you.
Amen.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Let me ask you this question, because this actually came up when we talk about God loves us, that he won't coerce our choices. And this person brought it back to what we've done several times, bringing it back to filial choices, parents and children. So if my daughter was attempting to commit suicide, do I love her so much that I won't interfere with her choice and stop her?
That's great. But relationship means that I will, because I am for everything that is love's kind in her, and her embracing of death is not of love's kind.
So
when
we embrace death, does God then intervene? I think the answer is yes, Jesus.
Well, I think that's right. But let's put it in space and time.
Yeah.
And say, in a given situation where someone wants to take their life, someone who's precious to you, and because this happens all the time, and God did not intervene, right? But then God doesn't look at death the way we do. We see death as the big immovable that defines life for us. And the point of Jesus is that Jesus came to declare that it's life that defines everything, not death, not physical death, not the outworking of what we have participated in that has been so death dealing in this cosmos.
I want to address that word intervene because it's really problematic. And yet I understand, like when we think about intervene, what we generally mean, how I would use it normally would be, something is happening and then I step in. So I'm intervening. Well, that's fair. But I think we probably should use that word more narrowly to say intervention is interference with secondary causes. And the secondary causes are natural law and human freedom. In that sense, God never intervenes, because if he did, you're in a big problem when he doesn't. So if God can intervene, why doesn't he prevent the rape? If God can intervene, why does he allow the COVID virus to enter an innocent or whatever? And then when he heals, we're like, well, he healed over there, but he didn't heal over there. What's with that? And now you just open up a big pack of, problems in terms of God being arbitrary and so on. So I think a safer route, so that God doesn't end up to blame or look arbitrary, or you have to blame somebody, would be to say that God does not interfere in secondary causes. He enters and participates and undergoes them all with us. And how does he do that? He does it not by intervention, but by love. And so love comes and it participates, and we find out love isn't violating natural law. It is the highest natural law. Love isn't violating human freedom. It is the most beautiful human freedom. And so in that sense, it's not like this thing was happening and then he kind of sticks his finger in the spokes or whatever. Maybe he doesn't stick the stick in, he sticks his finger in instead. No, but the idea is that all of these things his way of overcoming the problem of evil doesn't look like a superhuman, sometimes here and there, sticking his nose in her business. It's more like he enters the whole thing, becomes a participant in the whole thing, and it looks like a cross. So while I know what the general use of intervention means, and I don't despise it at all, I think it's good to sometimes grab it as a technical word for something the opposite of what God did. So we wouldn't say, instead of saying, well, he didn't intervene, we'd say, well, he did participate. And so we're back to that again. Does that make sense? Or have I just...
Totally.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I think the aspect of natural law is so significant in this, that part of the goodness of God was, you have a whole, I'm not a young earth creationist. So, we've got fossil fuels that are based on the physical, biological death of all kinds of creatures and animals and pressure and tectonic movements and all that kind of stuff. And that's all part of a good creation. The fact that you have pain receptors means that pain has a place just in terms of natural law. And so again, it's to understand also that the high view of humanity is that we're first order choosers. I mean, the choices we make really, really matter, and how we choose to live with each other, so now we come to issues of the poor and what we do in all of those realms, as far as displacement of people and where they have to inhabit that are dangerous, and it spills out from there. But I'm an optimist in the middle of all that because of Jesus, and because of the cruciform presence of suffering in the midst of all this that gives meaning to everything.
The wisdom here is that instead of looking to assign blame to God, or looking to assign blame to some evil cabal, that nobody, we only know about, a secret group understands, nobody else really understands what's going on in the world. It actually means that I'm now I'm the subject here. I need to figure out, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
How am I'm always going to this. I think it's an evil to split atoms, for instance. The destructive power that comes with that, we saw in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just says we can do something doesn't mean we should. And so you mess with nature, and this great evil is unleashed. That is death dealing and destructive of the world. And I appreciate how Paul, because I feel the same way, that there's some connection between the way we're trying to exist with nature, that we've created these violations and these crossovers that occur, very similar to splitting an atom. And so I think we're trying to learn with all the things that we're discovering where our limitations are. And the way that you put things here puts a responsibility and onus not on some secret group out there or God or something, but I need to figure out for myself, my family, my community, within the various communities that I live in, my country, and the world, how am I behaving? What am I doing in all of this? So
I love what you're saying, Kenneth, and I agree with you. I like, the phrase of not splitting an atom, and I think of Christ as the first atom, ATOM, not just the first atom. And we split the atom, Christ, anytime we split apart a paradox. And that creates darkness and evil, and we participate in that, sometimes ignorantly. I mean, I heard a quote recently that says, tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance, which is another way of saying splitting a paradox. And ignorance, then, on the split side of that, ignorance is participating in that removal of nuance unknowingly. And so what you're saying, Kenneth and Paul, that our job, our responsibility is to participate with, letting go of certainty is participating with paradox of Christ, and stop splitting Christ, stop splitting the atom.
Anybody else?
Well,
Baxter,
I
you've
want
been
to quote
unusually
Simone
quiet.
Weil. Sorry, we got to get Baxter in here, but just to quickly quote Simone Weil. Actually, she's riffing off of Martin Luther in the Heidelberg Catechism, I think, wherever it was. When you split that paradox, he talks about you end up calling good evil or evil good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Either this bad thing happened, God sent it, in which God is the evil, or God is good and he only sent this thing for good reasons, and now you've made an evil into a good thing. And so that's a devastating result of splitting the atom as you've described it, Katie. I think you're right on.
G.K. Chesterton said, when a finite mind tries to understand an infinite being, it's bound to split. We tend to split apart in our own minds when we lean on our own understanding. Baxter.
It all puts me in mind of the shorter catechism in the Calaban tradition, that God ordains whatsoever things come to pass, yet not so as to be responsible for evil. The original pretzel logic. I look at the whole issue is that somehow in Adam and Eve's choices, there was a turning away, and that sent ripple effects, and we're suffering from that. I'm not saying because we sinned or this happened that, tornado hit us pretty hard over the last several days. I don't think that's anybody in particular's fault. Not going there, but it is part of the human situation. And for me, the scene in Lord of the Rings when Gandalf is they're down in the tunnel and he's going across and the fire dragon is coming up, and he rams his staff and he screams out, "You shall not pass." And that's the death and resurrection of Jesus. However bad it is, and however worse it gets because of our buffoonery, that does not pass onto into the heavenly dimension. And all the years the locusts have eaten because of our own stupidity or our willingness or things that have happened to us, all of that will be restored. And that's the hope of the resurrection, is that we're not, and in the midst of this present evil age, as the Apostle Paul called it, the Father, Son, and Spirit are at work in specific ways to lead us, to teach us, to help us, to nurture us, and to hold us in our trauma and in our suffering of evil, to hold us so that we can feel what they feel. And in the midst of something that is apparently hopeless to us, we can share in their hope. So I think, Paul, you've done as great a job as you can do with the question. But the real answer all the way across the board is the incarnation and death and resurrection and ascension and session of Jesus at the right hand of the Father above all rule and authority in this age and in every age to come, and our resurrection and ascension and session in him. That's where it's headed. Meanwhile, we pine.
Yeah, so all earth groans, yep. All of creation groans.
Yes, yes.
And so talk about for a second the ascension, not just as a term, but what happened there and why. Like, that's why Stephen was stoned, right? And
yeah, he saw Jesus. Stephen saw Jesus. He was the first one that saw the prophecy of Jesus fulfilled when he said, "In that day you will know that I am in my Father. You are in me and I'm in you," because things are not what they really appear. There's another dimension that is happening. So the ascension to me is not that Jesus went up physically to the other end of the cosmos. It is heavenly, or the heavenly realm, or the heavenly dimension, or the heavenlies, I think is probably more biblical, is not outside of our space and time. It's in a dimension which we cannot perceive at the moment. But you get these massive revelations, like the transfiguration story. And so I look at it that way, that Jesus has gone into the heavenlies. He's face to face. I mean, he's gone into the temple, so to speak, where the Lord dwells, and we're in him, and he's in us. And that's what this is to me. And this gets into eschatology and everything else. And that's a whole nother subject, but we're not moving. Let me put it this way. We're not moving from the absence of Jesus to his second coming. We're moving from his presence to its manifestation. He has conquered evil. He has conquered evil, and we have conquered evil, and we're victorious in him. And he's teaching us little by little how to live in that. And that's manifestation of good. That's what Kenna Wayne keeps bringing up about learning to live with love.
And he did it as the Son of Man. I mean, he did it as a human being.
The incarnate Son.
Yeah. And so there, now you have all authority is given to me. So then we're not just caught into some cosmic war against viruses and against the demonic and angelic, all that. We can begin to say, yeah, no, we are such high order beings that we can see in Jesus the authority that has been granted back, so we can participate in changing things, and instead of being victims.
I want to add, and I come back to this again and again and again. It's so important to me as a person. But the Holy Spirit is a redeeming genius, and if the Father, Son, and Spirit can take our cursing and damning of the Word of God and turn it into the salvation and the recreation of the cosmos, they know how to take the disaster of coronavirus and make something beautiful and good come out of this, including the resurrection of all those that have died in this process. So I focus again and again on the sacred presence of the Father, Son, and Spirit, and what are they doing about this in terms of redemption? How are they working in our lives? And that's where we want to participate.
I think that's where what we're doing is an anti-theodicy. So in other words, for those who don't know or remember, theodicy was an attempt to rationally put together the goodness of God and the affliction of man. And so you try to create a rational way to do that. God is not justifying evil in any way, and he's not simply reconciling evil as a good. It's not a theodicy at all. It's redemption. It looks like a cross. It brings the contradiction together in a person, and not even just a paradox, but like a contradiction. But it intersects in Jesus, and it intersects in his life. And so instead of like why this, why that, it will be how does the redemptive genius move into our suffering and affliction, suffer it with us, and then overcome it. So that's not about justifying why it happened or any of that. It doesn't solve the problem, but it heals it. And
can we say this too, Brad, that we may not see in this life the healing of it?
Definitely not. Here's a quote I found today. Somebody posted it somewhere. Come on. This is from, I don't know who it's from, but a Jewish person. On Yom HaShoah, it's about the day of thinking about the Holocaust. May all our language about God, whether theist, atheist, or something in between, be chastened. No statement, theological or otherwise, should be made that would not be credible in the presence of burning children. Oh, it's by Irving Greenberg. Mm-hmm. So, I've used my test case too as a toddler drowning in their grandparents' hot tub. You're not going to come up with any rational answer for that. And in fact, you will not see redemption in that life for the child, certainly, and probably not the grandparent. And so we believe in a resurrection. Yeah. Any talk about God that has to ignore that kind of tragedy, that's not redemptive in this lifetime, it fails. It just fails. The Holocaust.
Brad, that was like really good, man.
Well, I quoted someone else. I had to go there, right?
So Kenneth, someone, in fact, I think it's Gary, maybe Gary from Australia, actually. But your comment about splitting the atom and stuff, it almost is like his question was, so then are cars and airplanes evil pathways because they can cause death, like nuclear power, all of them can be used for destruction. So how do we respond to a question like that?
Yeah, I just think that when we mess around with the building blocks of the universe in the way that we have in this particular area, and I know it sounds hard in our culture where we've come to accept that because we can do something that we ought to, or that or that we should.
Post-humanism, all of that.
It's a utilitarian thing. If we are capable of doing something, we should. And I just think we have to really step back from a lot of the things that we have done, and really think about, and I think we're on a collision course with this kind of philosophy informing our science and our technology and our drive toward, and I don't want to sound like a Luddite either, but at the same time, I think, we have to, at some point, question the limits of where we're supposed to be messing around. And there's just no comparison between splitting an atom with these bombs that we have, and that we have enough of to absolutely destroy the entire planet, but we've forgotten about that because we have, we've sort of just put it in the back of our minds or somewhere, or we're just denying it. But we have political leaders that could push buttons and really just destroy the whole thing. And we sort of put that out of our mind for a couple of decades, but nevertheless, this exists, and it's a manifest evil. None of us were there to go through Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but I guarantee you, if it happens to Paris or New York or Moscow or something, there's going to be a lot more documentation of what happened. And it's just a manifest evil. So it's not the same thing as an airplane going down or a car crashing. It just isn't.
Yep.
It's all about intent, right?
So
yeah. On an order of the magnitude. I mean, it's just a different thing altogether.
If you want to read something really helpful, and that's Jacques Ellul's work on the Technological Society or the Technological Bluff or those kinds of things. And Ellul was incredibly prescient and prophetic about a lot of his work in sociology. He's one of the top sociologists of the 20th century, without a doubt, and a theologian as well. And so, I mean, inside that conversation, but I don't want to lose also in the magnitude of the choices that other people are making that are not inside of our control, right? The governments and powers and all that, that a lot of times our sense is to throw our hands up and abdicate the change that can happen right in front of us with the person who's in front of us, with the extending of forgiveness. And I think that the simple act of forgiving someone or of praying a blessing for the ones who despitefully use you, or those kinds of things ripple into the cosmos in magnificent and powerful ways. And every one of those things matters, and it happens inside the world that you live in and move in and exist in, because that's where the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are present with you. And again, lots of things not in our control. Guess what? Control was a myth to begin with. And that's why I think a lot of times we want to posit a God who has a form of control that we would like if we could be God. And God refuses to have that kind of control. The fact that God created a human being who could create someone who could split an atom and destroy the entire world as we know it, I mean, that was implicit in the gift of being able to choose love, right? And it was never like, oh, because you need to go there. No, it was the whole point is that we live in love and we move in love and we make our choices because that's the character and nature of how we're created in truth.
Yeah, Paul, I'm sorry. Katie, go ahead.
talking about, the power of forgiveness is because all that power that's in the atom is in us, and we participate with the atom when we do things like that. What we loose on earth, we loose in heaven, and such like that. Like God, Christ participates with us, but we get to participate with the power of the atom as well.
And it's such an interesting moment. I think it calls into question so many things. We're talking about wet markets in Wuhan, but just our entire way of industrially producing our own food here in America, and what we're doing with our animals, and how something here hasn't gone wrong with the way that we treat the animals and the way we process our foods and everything. Another prophet, Wendell Berry. So if you're going to read and really start thinking about what it means to be a human being in the 21st century with all this technology and all of these practices that we have, Wendell Berry and Jacques Ellul are not, those two people would be really good people to read, to start to think about. And it does get back to, what am I doing with my body? What am I doing with where am I getting my food? How is that food getting to me? And questions that a lot of us just don't want to think about, but we certainly have a lot of time to think about it right now.
Thanks, Kenneth. Two things, guys, and Katie. So that, it's a Philadelphia generic thing. So,
No.
a book that you would recommend that speaks to the issue of theodicy. You guys think of a good one?
Yeah, hands down, it's a tiny little book, and it absolutely, utterly changed my life when it came out. And it's called The Doors of the Sea, by David Bentley Hart.
Phenomenal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is he angry in that book too?
Not as much.
No.
I would say
Thank you,
that book was it was a dim reflection of Simone Weil, Awaiting God.
Okay.
That you want to get my translation of it though. Awaiting God by Simone Weil. But really they're on the same page actually. And she has a chapter in there called The Love of God and Affliction. And it, while it changed Ken Tanner's life, it saved my life when I despaired. So I had to outdo you there, Ken, sir.
What do you mean by your
Thanks.
translation?
I translated two of her books. One had originally been called Letters to a Priest, another had been called Waiting for God. I took both French volumes and I combined them into one book called Awaiting God, with an introduction by her niece, Sylvie Weil, on Simone Weil and the rabbinic tradition. And so that's the one you want to get. It's on Amazon.
He has all these little things he's done that nobody knows about. You didn't know about this, right?
I didn't know.
No, I knew about it.
I didn't even know he could read, man.
Okay,
You
one
have
last.
to pull these
Okay, hold on,
projects
before-
out of him. Secret
Before we
projects.
go crazy here, one last thought, Paul, I wanted to kind of spin off that war will end today when you talked about the power of forgiveness. I'm thinking ahead of us, and the entire globe is facing choices, like just take one, for example, economically. If we were to choose to forgive each other debt, what that would do to the entire planet. Because of what's happening, people not being able to work, businesses not being able to make the money and on it goes. It's just this domino effect.
Yeah.
If we can start with forgiving people that are in our orbit, that we are with, boy, that would be awesome if it spills over to the globe.
Yep. Trust the ripples. Trust the ripples.
Yes.
Can
Instead of trying to control them.
Yeah. So I was asked to write a prayer for the pandemic a couple weeks ago. And can I close by reading it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That'd be
so
awesome.
let me just pull it up here. And you can see that I've been influenced by all of you in one way or another, because it just flows out of this. And I call it a prayer of trust and longing in a trying time. And here's how it goes. And the numbers rise faster than we can process that these are not numbers. but each of these is a person. And each of these is not only one, but an interplay of persons, family, friends, even enemies. And each blossom like a rose, blooming its red wound against the backdrop of 1,000 stories. Lord, have mercy. We know you are not the author of death, but you do know its grasp full well. We are not here to accuse, but to ask that you would be our comfort in the midst of the losses trending around us and toward us. Lord, have mercy. For we shall surely die and are like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Yet you, O Trinity of love, you do not take away life, but you plan ways so that the banished ones will not be cast out. That's 2 Samuel 14:14. Lord, have mercy. And as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil, for you are with us. Lord, have mercy. Comfort. Please comfort your people. Each human being in this moment needs to sense your relentless embrace of affection that whispers, I am with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Lord, have mercy, especially for those of us who cannot even celebrate the ones we have lost because we ourselves are among the banished. We cannot in community tell the stories and share the grief and hope that arises out of belonging. Our hearts feel cast off and cast away. Our emotions are overwhelmed and our crying offered in solitude. Lord, have mercy. In the midst of our sorrow, we give to you what we most cherish, our trust. You who are good and kind and present, we give to you our sadness and our longing. Speak to us your presence in the deepest places of our souls, and may, like children, we moment by moment place our trust in you. Lord, have mercy. Amen.
Amen.
Amen, brother.
Thank you, Paul.
done.
Can you share that, Paul? I'm sure others would like that.
I'll send it to
Yeah.
John and
Mhm.
That was awesome. Thank you.